With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Hello, and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Monday, 23 June. I'm your host, Daniel, and today we're going to be talking about the Iran president has said the US must receive a response for their strikes in Iran. NATO members have agreed to increase defense spending to 5%, and a deadly blast has hit a church in Damascus, Syria. So firstly, the Iranian president has said that the United States must receive a response to its attacks on nuclear sites in Iran. He said this in a conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron, according to the official IRNA news agency. In a post on X, Macron said during the conversation with the Iranian president, he called for de-escalation and for Iran to exercise the utmost restraint in this dangerous context to allow the return to diplomacy. The president called on Iranians to unite in the face of the attacks from Israel and the US. He joined a march in Tehran where demonstrators chanted slogans against Israel and the US, the Fast news agency reported. Iran's foreign minister said early on Sunday morning that there would be an everlasting consequence for the US attacks. So what? To me, how Iran responds here will shape how this conflict plays out. It's possible that they could look for de-escalation while maintaining face by firing missiles into pre-designated areas in some US military bases in Iraq and Syria. However, if that isn't the path they choose, and they do choose to try and conduct actual strikes against these locations, or use fighters within Lebanon or Israel to conduct attacks on US positions or US personnel around the globe, we could see a serious escalation. They do conduct an attack against the US and US personnel get injured or killed, then it's likely that US President Donald Trump will look to conduct further strikes against Iran, and we could just see a tit-for-tat increase in conflict until we end up in a full-blown war. So hopefully this isn't the path they choose, but we will see. The Iranian regime is very proud, so this is something you've got to think about.
If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths and sometimes heights to ensure the power is always flowing, which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And next, NATO members have agreed on Sunday to increase defence spending to 5% of their country's GDP, a benchmark long sought by US President Donald Trump, who had complained more vocally than other US presidents that his country had shouldered much of Europe's security for too long. Spain had sought to block measures, but ultimately dropped its opposition after a deal was reached for it to be exempt. It is also expected that NATO members will vote in favour of ramping up defence spending to 5% during the upcoming two-day NATO meeting set to start on Tuesday in The Hague. Once adopted, all members, except Spain, will have until 2035 to reach the 5% goal. The agreement calls for at least 3.5% of GDP to be spent on core military needs, while an additional 1.5% can be allocated to related expenditures. So what? It's interesting to see that countries have agreed to give Spain an exemption as, it's just a bit of a dick move. while every other country is spending money on defending the European bloc, and you're just bowing out because you're essentially the furthest country away. However, this is still super positive to see, and it'll be good to see what NATO will look like with this amount of spending, as it could become a pretty mean fighting machine. The additional 1.5% for related expenditures is also interesting to see, as it can be spent on cybersecurity and supporting military-related businesses. So we could see a big uptick in European defense manufacturing supported by this money, which would be awesome, just for Europe by itself to, support itself and not rely on foreign nations for making its defense infrastructure and, tanks, bullets, shells, everything like that. And lastly, a blast has rocked a church in Damascus on Sunday. According to eyewitnesses that told Reuters news agency, a suicide bomber detonated himself inside the church. Syrian state TV also reported that it was a suicide blast. Correspondents from the AFP news agency at the church said that they saw shattered wood from fittings and pews and pools of blood on the ground. At least 20 people reported dead by security sources and 52 injured, with the suicide bomber said to have been a member of the Islamic State. This comes as the Islamic State looks to regain some of its control within the Iraq-Syria area following the fall of the Assad regime and focus shifting to Iran. So what? It'll be interesting to see if the Islamic State does try and make a comeback within the Iraq-Syria region, as it's been reported for years that they have still had their sleeper cells and supporters laying low throughout the country for a long period of time with hidden weapon caches and money from their time as the caliphate. That's the word I'm looking for. While it's likely that the current Syrian leadership will have more chance of countering them due to their supported nature with the West, and they could work together to counter any threat from the Islamic State, it is a pretty turbulent time that could see some vacuums open up, allowing ISIS to regain small footholds. However, I think just due to their name, any area that is controlled by ISIS would very quickly become a target for the US and receive a pretty quick stomping. So yeah, I don't really see them making a good comeback. They still have a strong presence in Africa though, so there is that. But we'll have to wait and see what they try next. Thank you for listening to the Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you again tomorrow. See you.